Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 314 of CryptoBiography, and it is part 21 of The Brick Wall. And here we go. Jeffries beat the count, and Carson went back to the middle of the ring. Jeffries had his defenses up, and Carson looked to find another knockdown. But it was a ruse. Jeffries had gone down for real, but he was ready to keep fighting. When Carson went in with a big right, he slipped it, jabbed, and then smashed Carson's nose with a cross. Fool, thought Carson as he backed off. His nose hurt, but he didn't feel any blood trickling. He didn't think it was broken. The crowd was roaring at the champ's successful comeback punch. Carson put up his defenses and threw some jabs. They spent over a minute that way, circling around each other, throwing jabs and occasional crosses or other punches, but not finding a real opening. Then Carson found another opening. He had bobbed backward just out of the range of one of the Boilermaker's punches, and Jeffries had gone too far in front of his weight. He was unable to get back fast enough as Carson came forward and countered, first with a punch to the ribs, then an uppercut under his defenses. Jeffries went down again, and the referee started counting. Carson went to the neutral corner. The referee counted to 5, and Jeffries was getting back up. By the time of 8, he was looking the referee in the eyes. The referee gave the go-ahead for Jeffries to keep fighting. But just as the fighters took their first steps toward each other, the bell rang. Carson went back to his corner and prepared. He could win this. The bell rang once more, and the 11th started. Carson moved towards Jeffries. He was burning with energy. It was as if the previous 10 rounds almost hadn't happened. He put his chin down, threw a few jabs, and swung big. He hit Jeffries on the side of the head. Jeffries stepped backward until he was leaning on the ropes. Carson came forward and hit him again on the cheek. Jeffries stepped forward and clinched Carson. But he was also using Carson to hold himself up. The referee broke them up, but as he did so, Jeffries went down on one knee. The referee saw this and started a standing count. Carson had a thought. This fight wasn't his future, but it might hurt Jeffries. And more, he was thinking that boxing shouldn't be his future. If it wasn't his, though, he thought he didn't want to take it away from a good fighter like Jeffries. Jeffries, at least according to the referee, was okay to continue, so the fighters squared off again. Carson knew what he wanted to do. After a couple more exchanges of jabs, they went into a clinch. Jeffries was exhausted, his breath coming in fierce gasps. Carson said in his ear before the referee could break him up, "If you want to win, hit me in the shoulder. Make it look good." Jeffries grunted, which Carson could only take as a possible yes. The referee separated them, and they started exchanging punches again. Maybe Jeffries was thinking it over, or maybe he decided not to follow Carson's request, but he did not hit Carson on the shoulder. They exchanged punches, but Jeffries did not aim for the shoulder at all. Carson thought that perhaps the Boilermaker was too proud to take a win that wasn't fully earned. Maybe he thought he was so far ahead on the judges' scorecards that he could eat the last couple of rounds where he'd been knocked down 3 times and still win overall. In any case, Carson started to hit for real again. He went for it, throwing punches, looking for a real opening. When Jeffries hit him on the head, he backed up. Jeffries followed, hoping Carson was vulnerable, but Carson hit back, and one of his punches landed hard on Jeffries' nose. Then a second punch smashed him across the jaw. Jeffries went down again. He was relatively quick to get up, but the crowd was going wild. The referee continued the fight, and Jeffries paused just for a moment where he also looked Carson in the eye. And Carson understood. Jeffries was taking him up on his offer. Carson likely could win this fight, but that would severely damage the Boilermaker's reputation, losing in a non-title fight to an unknown. He would, instead, take the win. Carson changed his stance, not enough to be obvious, but enough to make his shoulder an easy target. After just a couple of quick jabs, Jeffries hit Carson's right shoulder hard. Carson didn't have to act. Pain popped through his shoulder, and Jeffries followed with a straight right to the side of his head. Carson hit the mat. He could hear the referee counting. He got back up, and he let his right arm stay low, not quite dangling, but as though injured. "Can you continue?" the referee asked over the roaring crowd. "Yes," Carson said. Carson played it as though he were having to keep away from Jeffries, and the bell rang a few seconds later. He went to his corner, played up a wince as he tested his arm, and poured a bit of water over his head with his left hand. The bell rang for the 12th and final round. Carson rose and brought his arm up only part way, as though he couldn't raise it fully. He jabbed with the left, but left the right near his body. Soon, Jeffries took advantage. He hit Carson hard on the cheek. Carson went down, and the referee started counting. All he had to do was pretend not to be able to get up before 10, which he did. He got up on one knee at 8, but was counted out before he could rise fully. The crowd was deafening. They acted as though nothing better had ever happened in all their lives. Carson finally finished getting to his feet and looked across at the Boilermaker, whose arm was being raised in victory by the referee. Other people from Jeffries' camp were clambering into the ring, congratulating him. Jake Abernathy came into the ring. He smirked at Carson, peeled off some bills from a stack, and let them drop at Carson's feet and said, "Welcome to the team." Then he went over to Jeffries' corner to Glad Hand. Lydia was leaning onto the apron, grabbing their money. He looked down at her. She glanced up and seemed puzzled when he smiled at her. The crowd was thrilled at the champ's big comeback win, but they at least seemed to respect Carson. They looked on in something like awe as he clambered carefully down from the ring. "There's a doctor there. Let's look at that arm." Carson thought fast. "Let's go back to the locker room area. I've got a few things there, and my ears are ringing out here anyway." Lydia also came. The doctor looked at Carson's shoulder. It hurt, but he was faking most of it. "It doesn't seem to be out of the socket. You might have a fractured bone in the socket. Tell you what," the doctor said. He pulled out a business card. "If you're not significantly better in 2 days, come see me. No charge." "Thanks," Carson said. Lydia and Carson made their way home. They were quiet for a while, but when they were about halfway home, Lydia asked, "So what is the plan? You were smiling after the fight." "My arm isn't really hurt. Well, it got hit pretty hard," he admitted, "but it's not broken or anything. I offered to let him win after I knocked him down a couple of times. After my last knockdown, he took me up on it. I pretended that my arm was hurt, and he knocked me out." "Okay, what's the plan?" "We take the $100, and after some preparation, we leave. We make our life somewhere across the country." Lydia thought, "Yes, that's probably our best option." "Thanks, my love. I know I didn't have a chance to run it by you. My plan is to make it seem like my arm isn't healing right, and therefore I won't be a boxer any longer. Maybe Jake will try to get me to do one of his shakedown jobs, but before that, we will leave. Don't tell any of your co-workers where we're going, or even that we're going." "Okay," Lydia said. She was clearly a little sad about that. "I'm sorry. Perhaps someday we can contact them again, but we'll make new friends out west." She hugged tight to him, and they fell quiet for the rest of the ride. The next day, when Carson's bruises had deepened, he discovered how hard the Boilermaker had hit. Lydia had her day off, and Carson had noticed how she was upset at the injuries he had sustained. His shoulder genuinely hurt, though he didn't think it was truly broken. To help it rest and recover, and also to keep their cover, Lydia made a sling for him. They rested that morning and also considered their situation. The $100 they had gotten for the fight was almost all the money they had. Lydia had done a bit of research. If they wanted to go across the country, $100 would not get them there. It might get them a bit more than halfway. "Perhaps we go to Denver, then, see how things are there. Either save up to keep going or decide we like it there," Carson suggested. "Yes," Lydia agreed, "but I like being near the ocean." Carson nodded. He would remember this. He would not let them be stranded in Denver or any other landlocked place. It was the least he could do. Just after lunch, there was a knock at the door. Lydia could hardly keep in a gasp as Jake Abernathy stepped into the room. There were 2 big goons with him, though they stayed in the hall. Carson stood up and put his good arm around Lydia. "Hi, Jake," he said as casually as possible. "Brick wall," Jake said with more than a half sneer. "Well, I guess we found a battering ram at last." "Yeah," Carson said. "You won the bet. Is that what you wanted? My concession?" Mostly, yeah, Jake said. How long until you can do some work for me? He added, with a point of his chin at Carson's damaged arm. Don't know yet, Carson said. Without the sling, I can't raise my arm above the bottom of my rib cage. I got a doctor who says he'll take a look at me if I don't show improvement in a couple of days. Well, Jake said, get well soon. He turned to leave, but as he got to the door, another man pushed past his goons and into the doorway. It was Jim Jeffries. Jake backed up in their apartment again, clearly shocked. Jeffries spared hardly a glance at Jake. He stepped past him into the room. But when Jake stood there gaping, Jim simply asked Carson and Lydia, "Do you have company? I can come back." "No, please," Lydia said, trying to hide a smile. Jake was just leaving. As Jeffries turned toward him, Jake nodded and backed out of the room. Jeffries closed the door, so it was just the three of them. And that's the end of the story for this week. Obviously, we're not done yet. We have had the third and final of the bet bouts, but it has not really solved all their problems, has it? So there's a little bit more to go. Hope you're enjoying it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Mastodon. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2023, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical. And one note here, although I have, said and meant this particular phrase, on every episode, because I really do, write everything with the intention of being original, Jim Jeffries is in fact based on a fictional person, a non-fictional person, a real-life person, and he was Jim Jeffries. His nickname was the Boilermaker, and he was the champion in the year 1900 when this story is set. In fact, I set the particular bout that he did with Carson in a period of time between two bouts that the Boilermaker had in real life. So, he's fictionalized, of course, because I don't really know much about what Jim Jeffries was like in real life, but we know he was big, almost as big as Carson, actually, very strong, and a really good boxer, and he actually held the championship for quite a long time. So yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story, and I will see you next week. I believe obviously the ends of stories sometimes, they take longer than you think, but I believe we're basically at the climax / denouement of the story. Thanks for listening.